Gautama Buddha, we're told, spent 49 days, 7 weeks in meditation under that Bodhi tree, not moving, not eating. It's quite an amazing feat. And it was out of that time that he received his mission, that he received his revelation, that he became enlightened and began his true ministry. The same is basically true for Muhammad. Muhammad would often go to Mount Hira to meditate, and it was in a cave at Mount Hira where he heard the voice of the angel Jibril and received his revelations, and his mission and his ministry began. So I think if it's good enough for all of those icons in our spiritual world, it's probably a pretty good practice for us to undertake as well. Hafiz describes this in a beautiful, beautiful poem called For 3 Days, which I would like to read to you now. And it has a little bit of humor in it too, which is typical for Hafiz. For 3 days, not many teachers in this world can give you as much enlightenment in 1 year as sitting all alone for 3 days in your closet would do. That means not leaving. Better get a friend to help with a few sandwiches and the chamber pot. And no reading in there or writing poems. That would be cheating. Aim high for a 360-degree detox. This sitting alone, he goes on to say, dear one, don't let Hafiz fool you. A ruby is buried there. Wow. A ruby is buried there. When you sit alone, when you take time out to go within, to take time in. It reminds me of the parable that Jesus told his disciples about the pearl of great price. A merchant was searching everywhere for the most exquisite pearl, and when he found it, he sold everything to purchase it, and the pearl of great price was the kingdom of God. That there is nothing more valuable. And we know, where do we find it? We find it right within. We find it in here. Ernest Holmes, our founder of Science of Mind, said, heaven is within us, and we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it. Hafiz said, I think we're frightened every moment of our lives until we know him, meaning God. I take spiritual food from these ancient writers because this, let's face it, folks, this is a challenging time we're all living in. It truly is. And I don't know about you, but it's easy to experience that fear that Hafiz talks about. What's going to happen with the election? How will we respond, both sides, no matter who wins? Will there be a smooth extension or transition of power? Will we get it? Will we be able to take what we know is now not working in our system and help make a nation and a world that works for everyone? What about this pandemic? Will we be able to survive it? There's many questions right now. And so more than ever, it is so important to take this time out. This week, as I have done so more than ever perhaps in my life, I actually have experienced that peace that passeth understanding. And that doesn't mean that a couple hours later, when we're in the fray of daily life and we're hearing the news, we're not back in it again. So it takes persistence, doesn't it? Another practice that I'm going to recommend is something I was introduced to, gosh, it must have been back in around the late 80s, early 90s, when my children were young. They attended a small Catholic school in Arizona called St. Jerome's. And every fall, the whole St. Jerome's community, which was a small one, practiced a week of being unplugged. So for 1 week, were encouraged not to turn on the TV, the radio, not read the news, just unplug completely. Now, in those days, we weren't quite as tethered to our cell phones and our computers as we are today. There was no Facebook. And yet, it made a big difference to do that. And what happened was we had more family time. We played games. We read together. We sat quietly sometimes. And so Julia Cameron, in her Artist's Way book, one of her original books, she had recommended reading deprivation, just as Hafiz talked about when you go into the closet where you don't even read. Reading deprivation, because whenever we're doing something or ingesting ideas from some other source, it takes us out of ourself, and there's great wealth to be had and inspiration to be had when we just sit with ourselves and that internal God. Now, when Julia Cameron teaches these practices, she no longer teaches reading deprivation, she teaches media deprivation. So not only do we not read, but she recommends for 1 week, unplug as much as you can from all media, everything. Now, there's a cute story, and of course we're bombarded, aren't we? We're bombarded searching the internet and Facebook and Twitter. And in one of the classes Cameron was teaching, there was a young woman by the name of Sharon. And when Cameron suggested that the class practice media deprivation for 1 week, Sharon had a fit, basically. She said, there's no way. I can't not check my email. I have to do it for work. And Julia gently reminded her, I'm not telling you can't check your email, but just do it as little as you need to. Do it when you need to, set a specific time during the day, and stay away as much as you can. Well, when Sharon left class that day, Julia thought there's no way she's going to do that. She may not even show up for class next week at all. Sharon was one of these students who came in with her phone in her hand, checking her emails. She would get a loud text or a call during the class, and she would turn the ringer on vibrate. She wouldn't turn it off. So another student in the class could be speaking, and she'd be answering a text, trying to pretend she was paying attention to the teacher, swore that she could multitask, that people in her generation could do this. She would take her phone to dinner, and on and on and on. Well, much to Julia's surprise, Sharon did show up for class the next week. Not only did she show up for class, she didn't have her phone in her hand, and she wasn't reaching into her purse to get it. She had cut her hair, had a new handbag that was very colorful, and she had this look of delight on her face as she walked in the class. And she looked Julia in the eye, and she said, my gosh, I did it. For a whole week, I did it. And she actually got tears in her eyes. And she said, I've realized I have been such a rude person. I go to coffee with my brothers with the intention that we can catch up, and I bring 5 friends along really effectively because I'm checking my phone while we do that. I'm getting out of an elevator, and I'm so lost in my texts that I'm answering a text, and I don't realize I'm standing in the way of everybody getting off the elevator. She said, I feel so embarrassed. And I'm realizing that there are a lot of other people that are acting just like me. And she said to Julia, because the whole point of this class that Julia was teaching was the artist way was to be more in touch with your creativity. She said, I wrote 5 songs this week, and I am never going back to the old habit again. Wow, what a transformation. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else will be added unto you, we hear in the Bible. I love Joel Goldsmith, who of course wrote a book called Practicing the Presence. It's a book that we read in practitioner training in our faith tradition. And I want to read to you a quote from Joel. He says, when we desire only a God experience, heaven itself will open up and pour itself out at our feet in the form of every kind of good. This is prosperity, my friends. When we desire a God experience and we take time to be with Spirit, to listen to Spirit, the doors of heaven open up. Everything works. Everything flows. Echoing that Hafiz poem, where Hafiz told us that complaint is only possible while living in the suburbs of God, Goldsmith goes on to say this: it would be an impossibility to find ourselves in the presence of God and find anything of a harmonious nature missing in our experience. Oh, doesn't your heart just yearn for that, to have nothing except a harmonious experience right now? I am come, he quotes the Bible, he quotes Jesus, I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. How could we possibly have the presence of that I, the presence of that God, and not have life and have it more abundantly? So when we speak and talk about developing a prosperous heart, experiencing prosperity in all areas of our lives, in loving harmonious relationships with others, even those who are going to vote differently from us, in loving harmonious relationship with ourself, in our health, our well-being, our mental health, peace, in our creativity. This is what we need to do, is practice the presence. I'm going to end with another mystic poet, Rumi, who wrote a poem called Hey. And again, there's a little humor in that. Rumi, from the 15th century, an Indian mystic. Oh, I skipped one. I'm going to go back. I'm going to read another one, and then we'll get to Hey. This was from the 15th century Indian female mystic poet, Mirabai. Isn't it great that we can have all this wisdom that comes from centuries and centuries ago, and it's still true? This, she wrote, a great yogi. In my travels, I spent time with a great yogi. Once he said to me, become so still that you can hear the blood flowing through your veins. Imagine getting that still. One night as I sat in quiet, I seemed on the verge of entering a world inside, so vast, I know it as the source of all of us. One night as I sat in quiet, I seemed on the verge of entering a world inside, so vast, I know it as the source of all of us. Isn't that the truth? The source of all of us is right here within, and we feel it. We are in touch with it when we get still. Finally, from Rumi, from the 13th century, the grass beneath a tree is content and silent. A squirrel holds an acorn in its praying hands, offering thanks, it looks like. The nut tastes sweet. I bet the prayer spiced it up somehow. The broken shell falls on the grass, and the grass looks up and says, "Hey." And the squirrel looks down and says, "Hey." I've been saying hey lately to God. Formalities just weren't working. So I encourage us all this week, this incredibly, in some ways, tense week, election week, to say hey to God, to get still, to take time out, to take time in. We're in that stillness. We know all is truly well. And in that note, or on that note, I go once again to our guest artist, Minoz, who's going to play some meditation music. So I invite you to take about 7 minutes to get as comfortable as you can in your chair, to relax, close your eyes, perhaps get so still that you can hear the blood running in your veins or hear the sound of your heart. Let's take time out to take time in together now with Minoz.